Betsy and Thomas here for the American Intelligence Media. Today we have 3 topics that we want to lay down on the tracks for you. The first one is we're going to look at an article that was posted recently on the Cat Report, and Thomas is going to explain to you how it is somewhat a piece of a propaganda piece, and you're just going to be smarter after you hear what he has to say about it. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at Bill Barr, what's going on there, and finally wrap it up with John Kerry and the Logan Act. Are you ready to start, Thomas?
Yes, we're going to be talking about liars, tramps, gypsies, thieves. How's the song go? That's what we're talking about here. So, at first, let's remember that this article that tells us that...
Okay, let me start this.
Yes.
Okay, the article, I entitled it, Seriously, Did Herr Mueller Hire Fusion GPS and Perkins Coie to Write Part of the Ca-Ca Dossier? And this comes from an article from, it was on Conservative Treehouse, but it was also Paul Sperry from Real Clear Politics, not the most reliable source to go to. So I brought this to Thomas's attention because I was looking at it, buying it. The question is, did Mueller outsource part of his work, and was it to these entities? And Thomas, he is so brilliant, he immediately spotted what's wrong with the article and the narrative.
Well, the conclave, 3/4 of them thought that I was wrong until I proved it to them, and we had already stated this before, so I guess some members of the conclave do not listen carefully to every single broadcast or read every single intelligence report, which that's okay because they would have no time for the rest of their life if they did. And many of the members of the conclave, like John Barnwell, is out there on Twitter just absolutely posting away some of the great, best little, I don't know what we call it, abbreviated, shortened versions
they're
of what we're talking about.
That's what I call them, truth bits, because, they're a little bit more than a meme, but it's information that people can digest easily. And if you want to access him, he's John Barnwell 888 on Twitter.
Now, you can check out everything I'm about to say. We've already, in the far past, we've discussed this, as well as we've given you the evidence. I'm just going to repeat it because Betsy asked me to do that. And because we're down there making such a ruckus debating these topics, she said, well, come up and put it on the recording. And I said, okay, here's the deal. Paul Singer, Bill Kristol both claimed that they paid for oppositional research on Donald Trump. Lie and a double lie. And, what is it? The Washington Free Beacon, I think it's called. And the other one represents, some conservative group. They didn't pay a penny. How do we know this? Because they produced no evidence to the effect. And when the Democrats got in trouble, first off, this was so beautiful. When they first got in trouble after Hillary's emails were released, and the DNC server content was released, we found there was an opposition research file that had been created in the fall, far beyond the fall, summer of 2016. And it was paid for through Perkins Coie. That's the reason there was almost $12 million paid to Perkins Coie during that time. But they were paid over a long period of time and for a variety of different things, remember. Perkins Coie and John Podesta lied when they were testifying under oath before the Congress, and they were asked if they knew about this dossier and whether Perkins Coie paid for it, and they said no, we don't know anything about the dossier, and no, the DNC, according to Podesta, did not pay for it. Now that is being looked at by Judge Leon, John Podesta's best friend, through a lawsuit that was brought against Christopher Steele, the writer of the dossier. Now, how do we know this is true? Because we know that Perkins Coie had already done opposition research on Trump. And when they couldn't find it, and that was early on, the Republicans who were running against Trump thought he had no chance. They weren't doing oppositional research on him. So it's a lie that it was done for other Republicans. That was to cover the lie when the DNC said that they first found out they were hacked in late spring of 2016. Lie. They know of the breach happening because it's in their December 2015 WikiLeaks released emails. And what did they say? And in these emails, look at them. It seems as if there's this block that people have because it came from WikiLeaks. They think it's not true. No, because it was supposedly stolen from WikiLeaks. No, that was a whistleblower. And we even know who the whistleblower was and how they got it out and all of that. It wasn't a Russian hack. So, what was really going on? The DNC had already done oppositional research against Trump, and they knew in December, I think 14th of 2015, that Trump was going to be their worst nightmare. And at the same time, they got their research done on themselves because they do oppositional research on themselves, and Perkins Coie did that on them.
How do they do that when they are scrubbing themselves from the internet right and left?
Well, that's the whole point. They wanted to find out what is left, what is on the internet, what could they go after Hillary for. And what did they say? John Podesta and Hillary's connections to Russia through Uranium One and through Jewel Unlimited. They are absolutely going to be able to pound on that and say, you are a Russian communist spy in bed with Putin, which she is. So they had to turn it around. So Bill Kristol, that shows that he's a rhino. And the other guy, Paul Singer, again, they're both fake.
Well, wait a minute. Now, before you go on...
I'm sorry. They're both just fake at what they do. Washington Free Beacon is nothing more than a left-wing rag flying a false flag.
But get into the other stuff about what the money really came from.
Okay, so when this is constant. Perkins Coie, wherever there's corruption, they're going to be there if it's political corruption. That's just the way that it is. So everybody hires them. Both sides hire them. That's Obama's lawyer for political matters, okay? When you want corruption, you hire Perkins Coie. So when they ran out because Christopher Steele got caught being basically on the FBI payroll, on Fusion GPS payroll, essentially then that would be then the Democratic National Committee payroll, and he is a foreign agent working with Russians, Ukrainians, and a lot of British spies. What are you going to do with that? They had to cover up the fact that Trump has no connections to Russia, so they had to make up something because they couldn't get any opposition research that said that when he was there for the Miss Universe pageant or in any way trying to get Trump Towers for 20 years. He has wanted a Trump Towers in Russia since forever, okay? And they tried. And other people came along and tried, but he had given up because basically, if you're not corrupt, the oligarchs know you can't be corrupted. And they can't manipulate you, so they're not doing business with you. That's the way it works. The Russians will only do business with people they can blackmail. And if you don't have something to blackmail, as Trump did not have anything to blackmail, but Hillary has plenty to blackmail, and then you get in bed with Putin, and then you get the Uranium One deal. So they had to come out and say that, oh no, it wasn't Hillary who was doing the early on opposition research on Trump. Yes, it was. She did multiple, and then she hired Fusion GPS because they are ex-mainstream media news people who are yellow journalists, who are propagandists, who then had to put the spin to turn it around to say, oh, Trump is doing everything that Hillary's doing.
Yes, but that's not what we were talking about. We were talking about that this article points to, did Mueller hire Fusion GPS?
Yes,
and
I'm not
Perkins
there yet.
Coie. Okay, so you're
the
getting there. Oh, a lot of background stuff. Well, while we're doing background stuff, let's not forget that Richard Burr's big thing this week was he wanted to shake down Donald Jr., right? And his biggest donor, Burr's biggest donor, is Paul Singer. And then don't forget that Paul Singer was a founder of Fusion GPS, and they were pushing Romney back then in 2012. So 16. So it's just all the globalists.
And that's the reason I hesitated to say this, but you have to say it now that since you said Richard Burr is a rhino.
Yeah.
He is the head of the Senate Intelligence Committee, and he allowed Dianne Feinstein, the majority leader, to run it when she was in it. And then Mark Warner took over for her. Remember, that's where James Wolfe, the biggest leaker in congressional history, leaked to his prostitute of many years, Alvy Watkins.
Oh, yeah.
and he went to jail for 2 months. Okay, well, at the same time, underneath him was Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones left when he saw that Perkins Coie was knocked out of the batter's ring. Why? Because Christopher Steele got caught working with mainstream media outlets who were being paid by the FBI. They were never supposed to get the dossier, but it was John McCain, may he not rest in peace, David Kramer, his assistant from the McCain Institute, that John McCain said he has nothing to do with when he was alive, sent over a copy that they went and chased down. Remember the whole thing, part of the whole thing early on in the early spring was when Andrew Wood met with John McCain in Canada. And Wood already knew that this was going on, that the setup of Papadopoulos was happening, and that there was also the setup of Carter Page, which was the dossier, was already happening. The first installments happened in March of 2016, as we told you, and we now have the proof because of the payments. We're the only ones who got that one right. And now Devin Nunes has come out and said that. So,
And then didn't you have Adam Schiff meeting with the Fusion GPS Christopher Steele in Aspen? Or who was he meeting with?
Well, he met with Cohen. He met with Steele. Yeah. These are both illegal. He tampered with witnesses. Nadler did the same thing and had his staff meet for hours with Michael Cohen.
Hey, are anybody out there keeping a big chart on this, like on your wall? If so, do a little YouTube video in it so we can see, because this picture is getting to be so big. I think we need a mural now.
So Daniel Jones opened Penn Quarter Group. Immediately after the heat was put on the Senate Intelligence Committee because Dianne Feinstein took Glenn Simpson's testimony behind closed doors and released it publicly. Then she quit and went over to the Judiciary Committee to get ready to beat up on Brett Kavanaugh, which she indeed did. And Mark Warner took her place. And Mark Warner literally sent letters to Christopher Steele. Mark Warner was on the Intelligence Committee, Senate Intelligence Committee, was one of the first people to put in writing letters to Christopher Steele saying, come to America, we'll pay for everything, come tell us the dirt you have on Trump. Richard Burr approved of all of that. So when we tell you what happened in that Intelligence Committee, you have to add Richard Burr. We said from the beginning, Richard Burr is as corrupt as he can be. He might as well be a demon rat.
And he sees the ship is sinking, and so now they're really desperate to have to call Trump Jr. back, and because they have nothing.
It was out of that committee, and another man, let's see, what was his name? Henry Kerner, who was another assistant of John McCain, was messing around with the Intelligence Committee and literally got the Intelligence Committee to offer Oleg Deripaska, who is there's Putin and then there's Oleg Deripaska. Now there's other evil ones below him, but Oleg Deripaska is as close as you can get to Putin, and he's filthy, filthy rich. He's been intervening in the 2016 election. But before that, we wouldn't let him into the country because of sanctions on him. He's got massive sanctions on him now that Trump put on him. But the point is, why? And no one wants to talk about this, because Oleg Deripaska gave $10 million to Daniel Jones, Dianne Feinstein's Senate intelligence staffer, who quit, went and created his own company, got $50 million out the gate, and he has two other groups, one called Democrats for Action, some other stupid groups, but they're both underneath Penn Quarter Group, and it's nothing more than another Fusion GPS. They took over where Fusion GPS left off. $50 million. $10 million Oleg Deripaska. We think $10 million from George Soros, could be 20, and then the rest came from Rob Reiner and other crazy Hollywood actors who probably share. And they get on the news every day, right? How do they get on the news every day bashing Trump? Because they paid to do so.
I mean, why are
Fusion
they on
GPS
Breitbart all the time?
Because
who cares about what Meathead says? And she's a washed-up old singer. But it's always on Breitbart, what they say.
Okay. Fusion GPS was Comey's group. Okay? They produced the news, and they had people on the payroll. We know this. Who were literally leakers for the FBI, CIA, DOJ, State Department, White House. They were the big leakers. They worked through Comey, And that worked through the Fusion GPS to create the Russian dossier because it was given out to us piece by piece. There were 11 installments. We got all 11 of those in different versions of these stories, piecemeal. That's what it was supposed to be. It was supposed to be an October surprise. Unfortunately, they started it back in March. And so by the time October came around, we had already busted them over and over and over again. 28 different crimes Comey committed. And we busted all of those, and there's actually more. So Comey controlled Fusion GPS, and Fusion GPS not only paid Christopher Steele, but so did the FBI. So did Comey. And we have shown that repeatedly. But they also paid the British spy, Christopher Halper, right? They paid him $1.4 million. Stephen Halper, $1.4 million to be the handler of Christopher Steele, the other British spy. And of course, Richard Dearlove, the ex-head of the MI6, was, of course, controlling Stephen Halper and Andrew Wood and Alexander Downer and Joseph Mifsud and Michael Gaeta and Gina Haspel.
Listen, this is a spoiler. You should have given a spoiler alert for people who are just joining us. They think it ends with Obama, and you're walking it all the way back to Buckingham Palace.
I had to answer the question.
Yes.
Did Mueller use Fusion GPS? No, he was covering for Fusion GPS. Fusion GPS had already pulled itself out. Remember, they need to go to jail for what Perkins Coie and they did in terms of interference in the election through Hillary and Podesta. We know that. Plus, we know that they are the ones who are the Russians, so the Russian collusion has to rebound back on them, not to mention the emails and to mention Comey's exoneration of her and Loretta Lynch's criminal activities in relationship to that. And then do not forget Sally Yates's continuing criminal activities, and do not forget
Victoria Nuland,
who was controlled by John Kerry. John Kerry stepped up, Secretary of State. He was 100% complicit in this, and that's the reason Trump wants to get him now on the Logan Act. Get him on the Logan Act, and it'll show that the conspiracy continues to this moment, trying to cover the $150 billion payment to Hezbollah, to the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, which Trump has now considered to be a terrorist organization. Well, hello, yeah, the largest one. But what did we do? We gave the largest terrorist organization in the world, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, $150 billion and a whole bunch in cash. We don't even know why, but that's what Obama did, so that it could then be spread to Syria. We now have over 1,000 missiles have been fired at Israel, paid for by Barack Obama. Okay? So that was that part. But when Christopher Steele got caught, Fusion GPS got caught, they're in 2 lawsuits. They got caught lying, and they had to come back to the Congress and state, oh, yes, sorry. Oh, yeah, that's right. We did pay for that opposition research, and there's nothing wrong with it. That's what Hillary said, and that's what Podesta said, and that's what Perkins Coie said. They didn't say, sorry for committing perjury and lying to you, Mark Elias, who was sitting right next to John Podesta. I watched them lie about this, and we busted them as the day they lied about it. And what happened? Nothing. So that's all part of Comey basically being given complete immunity. All right? But when Mueller stepped up to bat, now, I'm sorry it's such a long story, but Mueller is an idiot. He used Daniel Jones, who uses who? Dianne Feinstein, China spy Steen. Hello? She is a Chinese spy. Does anybody want to... Okay, so Daniel Jones is a Chinese spy. Okay? And what did Daniel Jones do? He worked with Oleg Deripaska, a Russian, to come up with, and George Soros, who should not be considered an American, and a bunch of other people, probably other foreign agents also, to give $50 million for research to give to Robert Mueller. I told everybody this when it was happening. And now this is obfuscation that you're seeing in this report. It's to try to stop them at Fusion GPS and do not show Oleg Deripaska, who is the real Russian here, who really did interfere and is still interfering because that $50 million isn't spent yet.
And that's why these people are fake news, because they're head faking you. They don't take you the whole way, and they keep you from looking at the real truth.
It was from Daniel Jones going back to a New York Times article in 2014. We've told you this repeatedly. It's easy to look up. And what was the report on? It was called Putin's Troll Factory, I think might have been the name of it. But anyway, in there it refers to Putin's Troll Factory in 2014, where he created dissent around the world by using the cover of his favorite caterer, Concord Catering, and the IRA, the Internet Research Agency. Mueller got the New York Times article. All the people who are the Russians charged, except for the fake GRU members, that's John Brennan went to Russia. Remember, at the beginning of the Crossfire Hurricane investigation, when John Brennan had no evidence, he went to Russia. He did what? Not in the news, untalked about, and he didn't even meet his equivalent there. What did he do? He went to get the GRU names. And with Nellie Orr, and he and Fusion GPS, they came up with the 13 GRU members who are just names. They don't really exist. So those are 13 of the indicted Russians. The other 12 worked for IRA through Concord Catering Company in 2014. When it ended, the company ended. You can see the article. You can see the people who were discussed. The very names that were indicted are people who came out after they were indicted and said, "Are you kidding? We haven't worked there since 2014. I haven't lived in Russia since then because it was all closed down because we weren't effective." And Putin didn't have any more money for it because he says Americans aren't our enemies now. Hello? In 2014, because Obama and Hillary were in bed with Putin, there was no need for the Putin's Troll Factory to go on spreading dissent in America against all parties. They just gave it up. Okay? That's how bad this is. So Mueller got an old New York Times article. That's where he got those names. When he was asked by Concord Catering to please show us all of these ads that supposedly we ran through 215 proxies here in America, which it's all lies. And that was after good old Zuckerberg said, no, we got, we got 24 Russians here, and that's all I got for you. Later, they had over 1 million ads in Russian brought to the court. Dabney, what's her name, Richards, good old Judge Dabney Richards, looked at this and then what did Concord Catering say? But wait, they're all in Russian. How did we influence Americans with ads that are all in Russian? Can you give us a translation? And then Mueller's team said, we never translated them. And so Concord Catering said, then how do you know that they are even political or had any influence on anybody? And Mueller's team said, oh my gosh, we're embarrassed. And that's what Concord Catering has been doing to them on every single issue. But Dabney Richards ruled that we can demand things from Russians.
I don't know if that name is right. Dabney. I know it's Dabney. But
is it not Richards?
But if it isn't, somebody correct us and I'll make a note of it.
I appreciate corrections because
there's just so many names to remember.
As of late, I have slipped up on a few things, and we appreciate it, and we thank the people who bring this. Literally, Oleg Deripaska paid Daniel Jones to create continuing opposition research against a sitting president that was used in a special counsel investigation. That is illegal. You cannot lead your investigation by a document that you did not create yourself or that you cannot verify or you cannot actually speak to and verify that it is real by the authors of it. So therefore, the very information that we tell you that is in the New York Times article shows that Robert Mueller, who's ex-military, has created a treasonous act that unfortunately, because he's ex-military and probably because he still has a security clearance that he hasn't turned back in.
Oh, this is immediate military tribunal for
Yes,
him.
He can have a military
Oh my gosh, we need to
court-martial.
we need to do that, and then we'll just never hear from him again. How solid is that, Thomas? How solid is that?
It's as solid as a rock. I told everybody this a long time ago.
You did.
We know this. And now they're trying to obscure it to make sure that it doesn't go back to the Brits and that it stops with Fusion GPS instead of going to Daniel Jones. $50 million was given to start that propaganda oppositional research yellow journalist group that was run by a criminal, Daniel Jones, directly from the criminal, Dianne Feinstein, who committed criminal acts on the Senate Intelligence Committee, to pay Christopher Steele to make up these lies from the beginning, brought to them by Kerner,
And you know what's
who
really
was
great?
brought to them by Andrew Weissman and by Zainab Ahmad, who were both on Robert Mueller's special counsel. In other words, the very people who created these documents were the investigators and the prosecutors. It's disgusting. And so do not be fooled when we see the real bank records for Fusion GPS, as I've said 100 times, if not almost 100. When we see those records, you will see the criminality that has led all of this. But until you see Daniel Jones' records for Penn Quarter Group, which is accepting who knows by now how much money, to continue the coup. In other words, I will bet you money that the lawyers hired by Nadler and by Adam Schiff were found and promoted through Daniel Jones' Penn Quarter Group. Because why? It continues to this very day. Wherever you see the pressure for impeachment, wherever you see the pressure for doing illegal actions so that they can have political clout to basically smear the other side, that's probably all oppositional research funds. Oppositional research should be illegal. It is lie. It is propaganda. It is what the CIA does. The CIA can't act in our own borders. Because why? We only use subterfuge, counterintelligence operations like used on Trump against our enemies.
Well, then that raises a whole nother topic, because who are our enemies? And we find out that it's really not who we think it is. Let's go back to Mueller here, because Mueller keeps a low profile, has a private life, and really, he's not a public persona anymore. So the military could just easily pick him up and take him through his tribunal. We wouldn't even know that he's been executed, and no one in the media would really care. But the swamp would freak out because they would know what's going on, and the rest of the people in America, well, we just moved on to the next topic because there's so many here. And then that's that for Mueller. One down. How many more to go?
One single white hat in the IRS could put in a single page document saying they would like to know why Robert Mueller has not paid any taxes on his tens of millions that he makes from Mellon Optima and from the Defense Fund.
I want to see him with treason.
I'm just saying, that's how simple it is.
He goes back to 9/11 cover-up with Arvinder Sembai. We really need to remove him from Western civilization.
He is friends with Joseph Mifsud. He's friends with Arvinder Sembai. He's friends with all the people who were part of this conspiracy. And now we have Nunes saying that he has pictures of Arvinder Sembai and others, Joseph Mifsud, meeting with Western intelligence agencies. Hello, Link campus in Rome, Link University campus. Hello, it's nothing but a Western intelligence spy training school. It's literally just look at the courses they offer.
Let's go to Logan Act with Kerry.
Okay, so Kerry is still meeting with Zarif, or whatever his name is, the basically foreign secretary or secretary of state of the Iranian government. This is who he did the underhanded deals with. We don't even know why $150 billion. We know why the first pallets of money went, because of some nonsense that Obama made up that we owed $400,000 that we held in sanctions against the Iranians for decades and decades, and so he turned that into billions and then gave that in the currencies that they wanted on pallets that we snuck into their country without any kind of overview of, the U.S. Federal Reserve, anybody else who moves currencies around. How did that much currency ever get put into a plane? Anyway, Obama's such a criminal, he pulled it off. And then $150 billion. Now, you can debate all day where those statistics came from and why they came. But what we've basically done is Obama said, sanctions have harmed you so bad. And what are the sanctions for? Them continuing their nuclear uranium enrichment so that they can make a bomb. And what did they just say recently? We've been continuing it all along. So Trump was right. Trump was absolutely right. The Iranians are moving as fast as they have ever moved towards a bomb right now. And who's paying for the bomb? Same people That would be the State Department and Obama. That's the same, and then later, before that, Clinton. So you got Clinton with the Obamas, who gave the money to North Korea so that they could have all of their enrichment plants, which we built for them, and we're doing the same dadgum thing for Iran. Now, isn't that a little bit shocking when you hear that? And we gave them $150 billion to do so, and they turned around and gave those missiles, of course, to Hezbollah, Hamas, and Syrians.
But it's more important, I think, is that the president has put John Kerry and the Logan Act together in a complete sentence.
He's done that once before. Now, the reason is because the European Union, when the sanctions were put on, there were different dates that different aspects of it were enforced. So the European Union literally came out and said, we're going to ignore those. We're just going to give the money to Iran. And Trump said, you do that and see what I do about NATO. And so Angela Merkel got the European Union to say, we're going to do a run around here. We're just going to do an end run, and we're going to create a new way to give $400 million in cash directly to Iran against all the sanctions. And they did. Okay? So John Kerry's been going over there, and he's been saying to them, these side deals we had going on, we're going to keep the money flowing. It's going to come to the European Union now and Soros, but just keep our deals going on. And we know you're still continuing with your nuclear, but we still want the oil, because it was the French and the British who had it. Now who has the oil? China and Russia. Because why? China and Russia gave missiles to Iran to defend themselves, but also to give to, of course, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and so on and so forth. And so that's the 1,000, literally, I'm not exaggerating, 1,000 missiles have been fired at Israel.
Well, John Kerry and Robert Mueller went to school together when they were young boys. You see pictures of them in their cadet uniforms. I'm not sure if it's post-secondary or secondary, but nevertheless, don't you think it'd be really great if... Or what do you think that John Kerry would do if he finds out that his friend Mr. Mueller is standing trial in front of a military tribunal?
They're all going to skip to Paraguay or wherever they can not be extradited. And remember, John Kerry's working directly with Peter Strzok, and Peter Strzok is Peter Strzok 3. There's Peter Strzok 2 and Peter Strzok 1, and they both were Iranian sympathizers who are into the nuclear. Strzok 2 and Strzok 3, literally Strzok 2 is the guy who stayed there. And
okay, but you got to clear that up. You're talking about Peter Strzok's father?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, well, that's Strzok 1. Who's Strzok 2? Mother?
No. There's 3. He's third. So Peter Strzok, the evil Strzok Page, right? His daddy,
yes,
is as Iranian as
we know that,
as horrible as they can get, and he's directly
who's
connected.
The other Strzok?
That's his daddy. That's the granddaddy.
So it's 3 generations of Strzok's.
These people have been involved in the CIA attempts to disturb things in Iran for multi-generations.
Wow.
And so remember, Peter Strzok is basically the ultimate 007 for America. He's the ultimate counterintelligence. He's still not fired, y'all.
No,
he still works as, I believe, a regional director in the CIA counterintelligence. He got fired from the FBI counterintelligence. He got fired from the Mueller investigation, but he did not get fired from the CIA. So he is still running things. And just like everything had to go through Mueller for the DOJ, everything has to go through Strzok to make sure that there isn't a black ops counterintelligence operation going on, which they don't have to even tell the president about. They don't even have to tell the FBI counterintelligence. They don't have to tell anybody. The CIA is non-constitutional. It's unconstitutional. Get rid of it. It is nothing but bad. Its whole origin, everything it does, is evil. And why? It assumes that it is fighting our enemy, and therefore all is fair.
But then we always have to have an enemy because they have to have a reason to exist. So they always put out a fire and then start another one.
The Geneva Convention and all other international treaties having to do with war says that the CIA can't exist. So they created what they call the long war, the slow war, which is the war against terrorism, which will never end. And that way the CIA can work inside our country, outside the country, anything it wants, do anything it
And
wants.
don't forget who was sitting over there in the London office when this overthrow of Donald Trump was planned out, and now is the director of the CIA, Gina Haspel. What good is that? And did you see Christopher Wray's testimony the other day? Boy, is he covering for the swamp.
I haven't seen it, but after his last testimonies that I've seen, he is as bad a liar. He's a terrible liar, and he's just as much a liar as Andrew McCabe and Comey. And though he might not have been part of it, I imagine he was read into it, or else he would have never, ever gotten the job that he has, because he's doing a great job continuing in the tradition that the FBI is the biggest criminal organization in the world.
And that's where I want to segue into the comments you'd like to make about Bill Barr and what you're seeing over there.
Well, Bill Barr is a genius because he knows the power of the Congress. He almost didn't take the oath that he was going to be under oath. You want to know why? So here you have the Attorney General, who basically was starting his testimony, and they had forgotten to swear him in, and he didn't mention it. Because he knows that you can lie. He knows there are laws that say you can lie to Congress, because Congress isn't going to hold anybody responsible. They can recommend criminal prosecutions. They can impeach. But they have to impeach in a certain way. They can hold Barr in contempt of court. So what? Eric Holder was in contempt of court. They refused to respond to that contempt of Congress, because why? They let the statute of limitation go out. 7 years is up on Fast and Furious. He is a murderer. He is a killer. You would have to say he's responsible, Eric Holder, for thousands, if not tens of thousands of deaths on the southern border.
Well, that's what they do with lawfare. They just run down the clock so their murderers can go free.
Attorney General. Okay, so the person who is supposed to be the top lawyer in the country is out murdering people on our southern border and creating the mess that we have now, and telling Obama to start DACA, to start anchor babies, to start catch and release, to start all this unaccompanied minors. These are all criminal actions.
Against America. It's more than that. He is an enemy of America.
So the Attorney General is very, very powerful. And he works directly for the president, but Obama tried to act like he wasn't in control of all his agencies, and that the FBI acts completely separate from him. We now know Comey was in his office discussing the dossier minutes before the inauguration of Donald Trump, saying, "Keep me informed." It was as if he was telling them, we still may not let him get inaugurated. And if that's the case, then when we get the true text messages, a lot of people are going to be talking about assassination of Donald Trump and stopping him in any way they can from being inaugurated. It was called the resistance, and the resistance gave people the right to set you on fire if you had a red MAGA hat on. It gave the right to kill people, to run people over with cars. Literally, a couple were getting married. They got in an argument about Trump, and one ran the other over right after the wedding. Okay? People were set on fire. Relationships have ended. Marriages have ended. Why? Because that's what happens when you wake up to the subliminal control of hypnotism of the mainstream media, and someone comes along and bursts that bubble. You get really mad because that destroys your worldview.
Yes, totally. Annihilates it.
And then you don't have anything to stand on. You have to start building again. You have to say, well, is that true? Is that not true? And now everything that Pelosi says is not true. So you now know this. And whoever's screaming loudest in the Democrats, they're the most guilty. For instance, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Her crimes during her election should put her in jail. Same thing with Ilhan Omar. Same thing with Tlaib.
Well, would we be looking at the Department of Justice for something there?
That's the whole point.
Well, where are they? I mean, I'm still where I want to see some high-level indictments.
Well, the FBI doesn't go after anybody without the nod from the Department of Justice. People don't understand this. Period.
Yeah, but
no FBI does not act independently. Okay? They are a federal bureau, and guess what? They are in direct control of whom? The Department of Justice. They don't have any authority. And who is in charge of the Department of Justice?
By the Department of Justice.
Pardon me?
By the Department
Correct.
of Justice. Okay.
And who controls the Department of Justice? They're controlled by a general. And who controls that general? The commander-in-chief. And it is military when it comes to the top. That's what the reason all senior executive service members and most top agency people are all senior executive service members. They consider their position to be equivalent to a general. So in other words, there are literally certain senators and members of the House and certainly judges and all kinds of other people who are senior executive service members who are in control of agencies who believe that they are as powerful as the Attorney General, the Department of Justice, and as powerful as the President. You got to hear that the Speaker of the House thinks she's as powerful as the President, if not more powerful, and she was carrying the fascists, this unbelievable Roman statement that Caesars are gods. And she was wearing this on her lapel until we busted her for it and called her out on it. And she's never worn it since that I've seen. But this is the delusion of a Pelosi. This is the delusion of an Adam Schiff, of a Nadler, of a Cummings, of a Robert Mueller. Robert Mueller said he is above the law. He's above we the people. He's above the Constitution. He quoted this in his report.
Years and years ago, Mueller wrote laws to allow him to be over the law.
And to control evidence.
And then they had groups come to sue them about it, but they made sure that those suits were settled in courts that favored Mueller's original law.
Oh, that's the biggest news going. First off, when you talk about Barr, the biggest news going is that they're now, Pence says that the Trump administration is going to question federal circuit court decisions to be able to overrule a White House decision or executive order that is a national order, because and this is what we've said all along. Federal circuit courts in states have no authority.
They have no authority
over all states.
Yeah.
They have no authority in many cases over the executive, and they certainly can't overrule an executive order that is directly constitutional.
Yes.
And if they do, and guess what they're going to do with this?
They need to
exactly what we said.
They need to impeach those judges.
They have to take it to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court is going to have to draw back the authority of these stupid federal circuit courts.
While we're drawing back curtains, let's draw back the curtain on the Supreme Court and see a living, breathing, fully capacitated Ruth Ginsburg.
I love the meme you have of somebody spraying Febreze on a green and crusty, moldy old Ruth Ginsburg. Why? Because her health is the most important thing in America. And we don't get to see a picture of her going into work?
Well, here's another thing. She was at George Washington Hospital there quite regularly up to the last time we really spotted her. And I've had no intel say that she's ever been seen there again. Does she have a miraculous recovery?
Ruthie's got to go because we're going to be voting on calling back the overreach of federal circuit courts, just like the Ninth Circuit, which it's a racket the way we've explained the way they were set up. They were set up wrong to begin with, and the Congress has the right to close them all down. That's what people don't understand. Federal circuit courts and appellate courts can be closed down by an act of Congress, period. All of them. And as we've said, if you get rid of the IRS, you call all the other federal courts back to the District of Columbia, and they won't have any work to do because the states will simply handle what goes on in their states. And if there's an issue between the states can arbitrate it. There is no reason for federal courts getting involved in anything that isn't truly
federal. That was the way our enemies infiltrated our government. And then they set up this separate court system for themselves in their little star chambers.
We have a friend whose house is being stolen, and now, after fighting it for years and years and years, they're moving the case to a federal court. Well, she and all her lawyers know she's lost now.
Yeah.
Because that's a setup. Everybody knows that.
They want her property. Look, we got to go because, we can't go too long. People get bored listening to us.
But wait, A.G. Barr said all these immigration laws that Obama was breaking, nope, no more. He also said we can say full. Sorry, we're full. No more asylum. We're full. That's what Canada did. That's what everybody does. We're going to do that. That's A.G. Barr. Contesting the federal courts, A.G. Barr. Going after spying, A.G. Barr.
Well, I guess there's some good checks in the box then for him.
But the question is going to be, is he going to simply do what we said he would do. We said he would stay true to whoever appoints him. We said the same thing about Brett Kavanaugh. Yeah, they're old Bushites.
Yeah, but Kavanaugh is going over to England to teach for the summer. Why is he teaching law over in England? And then you've got
a cash
Gorsuch,
payoff.
and you've got Gorsuch going to Italy. What is this, the way that they welcome the new judges into the Knights of Malta and give you your little offshore account?
Gold bearing.
Well, we're watching.
Gold bearer bonds in politically approved satchels that have political immunity.
Yeah, so they don't
That's
get
the
checked
only
at all.
reason that a Supreme Court judge
have
would
to
be
physically
leaving our country to go teach at a tiny university that no one even knows exists.
When all the law schools in America would love to have them for the summer. I'm telling you, folks, if anybody can get that message to where it needs to go, we need to check on those judges and what they're doing overseas this summer.
Just make sure you notice that they're going to have two stops. One will be where they teach, and the other will be where they put the offshore bearer bonds. And I will bet money on that, okay? It is so transparent, the evil that happens when judges get appointed so they become insiders. And then when they're appointed to a case, they are told by the SES what to do if they're SES members.
Disappointed with Gorsuch. I mean, I knew Kavanaugh was SES, but I had hopes that Gorsuch wouldn't be one of these sleaze bags.
Well, John Roberts is the worst right now.
Well, I know that, but as you say, it's very transparent what's going to happen in that trip.
And what's happening now is we're seeing, through transparency, the end of the swamp, because the loudest people screaming are the most guilty, and now everybody knows. It's like it's like the emperor's new clothes. Sorry, we noticed that you're naked.